listening to the Shared Security Podcast with Tom Eston and Scott Wright, exploring the trust you put in people, apps, and technology.
Hosted by Scott Wright, the Streetwise Security Coach, and Tom Eston, Penetration Tester and Ethical Hacker. And sponsored by Security Perspectives, your source for tailored security awareness training and assessment solutions. We bring you stories, advice, and tips to help you make better risk decisions because nobody else can make them for you.
Episode 57. Strong security on Windows passwords is nice, but guess who left the side door open to Windows password attacks? Could it be Microsoft?
Hello and welcome to the Shared Security Podcast. I'm Scott Wright, the Streetwise Security Coach, and I'm here with Tom Eston, who, if I read his LinkedIn profile correctly, he's an avid bow hunter.
Apparently I am.
Yeah.
How about that?
I didn't know.
Thanks to my friends.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that a little later, right?
That's right.
Good stuff. Well, it's been a little while. We got a little distracted, I guess, in the last month. Didn't quite get our monthly podcast out, but I think we'll try and get back on track. We have some good topics today, and why don't we jump right into the agenda?
Let's do it.
So what's up
All
first?
Right. So we're going to talk about a couple of the big password breaches that have happened. So if you've been watching the news, it's been this whole rash of different applications and different companies that have been disclosing breaches. Two in particular, Dropbox, which is a pretty popular application that a lot of people use. And of course, Yahoo. Many people use Yahoo services, and they had, which it looks to be the largest password breach in history. So We'll talk a little bit about that.
That's sad, but yeah.
Sad but true. And we'll also talk about the largest distributed denial of service attack that has ever been found or reported, that happened to one of the InfoSec journalists, Brian Krebs, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we'll go into how hackers are able to track your keystrokes through your Wi-Fi signal, and of course, I put hackers in air quotes, right? And of course, some of these things are in theory or proof of concept, but nonetheless, it could be kind of concerning.
It's the kind of thing that we like to be bleeding edge on, right? We want to bring it out, make sure people know about it. Good. So
that's right.
We'll be there.
And then, and then we'll touch on a little bit about password cracking and how passwords just in general haven't really changed much in about 20 years or so.
They're still made of characters and things. Yeah.
Yeah, still very easy to crack.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one. And then we'll finish up talking about those chip and pin cards that here in the U.S. everyone is, merchants are now starting to implement, and we're seeing those everywhere. I know in Canada, you guys have been way ahead of the curve for a while.
Really old news.
It's old news that, here in the U.S., of course, we're a little behind the times in the rest of the world. So we'll talk a bit about how those may not be as secure as people think. And then we'll talk about how you can ensure that all your friends on LinkedIn like things such as bow hunting or other types of hobbies.
Basically playing with people's competencies. Is that what you call it?
Playing with people's skills, yes.
Skills, yeah. Right. We can't literally change how competent they are, but that would be nice.
Right.
All right. Well, so let's have a look at Dropbox.
Yeah, Dropbox. So this happened. This is end of August. This came out. Stories kind of hit the news. We've talked about similar breaches in the past where we've had. These are breaches that have happened back in 2012, 2014. I mean, we're talking several years ago. But now all of a sudden these, the files and, the password hashes have been released to the public, and have been leaked. So again, this is another one of those situations. There actually was a disclosed breach several years ago from Dropbox saying, hey, there has been a breach. Go ahead and change your password. This happened back in about 2012. So if you
it was a good
had
year for
gotten
password
that,
hacks, 2012.
yeah, it was all over the place.
Well,
And
wasn't that the
so,
year of the Armageddon? You know, we were like the end of the
yes,
world. It kind of was, but
that
we
was
didn't know it.
the Maya,
Yeah, that's right.
yes,
Mayan
predictions,
apocalypse or whatever it was.
Mayan calendar, all of that. Yeah, and of
Yeah.
course nothing happened.
Now it
But
says
we
that
did have,
Dropbox announced, or somebody decided or determined there were 60 million accounts hacked. Was that announced at the time, or has that number sort of become clearer recently?
sounds like that number went up because I don't think at the time they knew how many accounts were
Okay.
potentially breached. But it looks like 68 million based on this one technical article going through the number of accounts that were breached. So this is another one. So if you did change your password back in 2012, you're most likely okay. However, I would ask the question of how come you haven't changed your password since 2012? You may want to just do that as kind of a best practice, right?
Or if you're like me and you created an account in maybe 2010, 2011, then discovered that Dropbox wasn't as secure as you wanted it to be, and then stopped
Right.
using it, you may not have changed your password. You may have forgotten
Right.
you had the account. So
Exactly.
it's a good thing to go back and look at.
Yeah, and the one thing I always about any password breach, whenever a big one like this hits, I kind of use it as a reminder for me, and I tell my friends and family as well of you might want to go through and change passwords for any sensitive account or any account that you use in general, just as a good idea because these things do happen almost almost weekly now.
Yeah.
So, a good idea to be ahead of it.
Yep. Yeah. Yes, sadly. Okay. Well, so a question I had for you though is in general, as I sort of referred to early on, we sort of thought of Dropbox as not being that secure. A lot of businesses that I work with have, blocked access to it by employees. Do you think it's gotten more like acceptably secure at this point?
It's gotten better. They've had issues in the past with people getting access to other people's Dropboxes through links and other problems that were kind of more on the application security side. Those have all been resolved.
Right.
I think they've done a better job with with securing that data. I'd say the same for any of those types of services that are popular. Box is another one
Right.
that's pretty popular as well. Um, it, take it what it is. I mean, there could always be nothing is 100% secure, so
Right.
you have to kind of do your own risk evaluation at that point. Personally, I wouldn't put anything that I would consider sensitive information in Dropbox. Just because my risk tolerance may be different than others, but
Yeah.
if you're sharing documents for your kids or for school or for something that really doesn't matter at the end of the day, if it did get disclosed,
Yeah.
then you're probably safe.
Yeah, we use it to exchange links to our podcast for downloading, so it's reasonable for that.
Please steal our podcast.
Yes, that's the thing. We don't even put a password on it. You
That's
get
right.
you get the raw, unedited version though. So,
Yeah, free for everybody.
yeah, cool. All right, well, let's move on.
Yeah.
What do we got next?
So on that same front, Yahoo had probably the largest, right to date, the largest password breach in history, which is 500 million user accounts. That again happened back in 2014, a few years ago, and now this is all coming to light, and Yahoo has actually confirmed that this did happen. And this is a big one because we're talking about, the biggest piece of Yahoo is really Yahoo Mail. And, if you have a Yahoo Mail account, you need to change your password immediately. There's also a good article I linked in the show notes from the Wall Street Journal on why Yahoo isn't doing like a giant password reset. And the reason for that is because guess where those password reset emails go? They go to your email, which could be compromised. So you may be giving the attacker your new password or the ability to change the password again. So thereby locking you out of your account.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. It's similar to one that I think A couple of years ago, I remember it was one of the, oh, darn, I can't remember now. There was a company that was, it's The Onion. Remember The Onion got hit with a social
Yes.
engineering attack.
Yep.
The Onion being the parody newspaper, right, or news website. And they had a similar thing where they got phished, some of their employees, by attackers who used a Gmail sort of impersonation thing to try and get them to log into their Gmail account. And once they provided the credentials for that, it was like a failed login. But then they had those credentials and they tried to use them to send emails from people's accounts to other employees. And so then eventually they detected that, either dozens or hundreds of employees kind of had been compromised into clicking and getting their systems infected. And then they sent out an email to everybody saying, okay, everybody has to change their passwords now, but the attackers actually got the email notification. So they sent another one saying, oh, by the way, here's a link you can reset your passwords at. So yeah, the whole idea of sending an email out to notify people of a compromised email is something you have to think about.
That's right. So our best advice is if you have a Yahoo account, any type of Yahoo account for anything, not just email, you need to change your password immediately. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the next coming weeks, just because if you're not aware, Verizon just bought Yahoo. So now this is going to be Verizon's problem to deal with.
Yeah, that's assuming they actually complete the transaction, right? They would.
That's right.
That would be a surprise. I wrote a blog post article, I think, about this, sort of saying, this kind of a thing, if you're not prepared for it, can certainly affect an acquisition, right? Say, hey, there's a new valuation on this organization based on the amount of cost it's going to take to get things back in order.
That's a lot of risk.
And maybe lost revenue from lost clients and stuff. So, yeah, it is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. But again, change your Yahoo password.
Yes.
That's right. So what about this distributed denial of service attack?
Yeah, the one on Brian Krebs.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah, he feels kind of important. He got the world's biggest denial of service attack against his website, so to date. Anyway.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and I haven't read like all the details of why that happened, but I think he was doing some research or doing an article on some hacker groups, and I think they didn't like that, so they figured out a way to send. This was a 620 gigabit per second denial of service attack to take that site down. And what was interesting to me was that the devices to send all that traffic to Brian's site were all Internet of Things devices. So we're talking about home routers, security cameras, those types of devices were all hijacked and used in this attack.
Yep. And we've talked about that before, how devices that are sort of relatively harmless in design can, if they aren't built securely and they're built to be connected to the internet or to be smart in some way or other and connected, they can and will be basically abused and usually weaponized, right? Turned into some kind of an attack thing. So no matter how harmless the device seems to be, if it's usable by attackers in some way, they'll find a way.
Yeah, and the kind of the attack vector there was default passwords on those devices, which usually are admin password to log in, and people don't change them, and they're sitting there out in the internet, so it's pretty trivial to write a script and find all those devices and then use them for your bidding.
Yeah, and if people don't. If you haven't heard the term, I'm sure many have heard this term, the distributed denial of service attack. When we say denial of service, we're saying it's a flood of information or data coming from all over the place to one site, right? Basically to overwhelm it and take it down. So if you had thousands of cameras under your control, each one sending as much data as it could, and sometimes they can be amplified, right, through reflection attacks, like sending them to a DNS server and having thousands of responses to it, all pointed at this one place. So it can be magnified many times from the actual number of devices sometimes. So yeah, that amount of data, 620 gigabytes coming from all over the place, arriving at one doorstep, is probably overwhelming to just about any website.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just interesting to me that these attacks have really evolved, and now using the Internet of Things devices that are all over the place. We'll see what happens
Mm-hmm.
in the future, but it's good to see there are companies that are providing protection up to a point. So
Yeah, it's good marketing for them when this kind of thing happens.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But yeah.
But it's something that I think is just going to get worse.
Yeah.
As time goes on, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately. Okay, so next we have key logging via Wi-Fi.
Yeah, this was fascinating. This was some research that came out. Trying to remember where I was at. Mobicom 2015. Apparently, I think this was an older conference, which was interesting last year. But now the research just all of a sudden appeared. But it sounds like there's some new ways to track keystrokes through just by listening to the Wi-Fi signals in the air.
Right.
I think it's fascinating. I think we talked about something similar using, I think it was audio, right, to disrupt how computers process information.
Yeah, there are many types. In fact, if you listen to the Security Now podcast, Steve Gibson sort of has another acronym for it. It's like yet another way to track you or something like that. I can't remember what he called it. But there's just so many sort of research projects that have been done on how you can detect anything unique about a keystroke, whether it's magnetic or sound or temperature, vibration, whatever, right? So this is another way, and it is kind of, it's interesting, and you would think reading it somewhat impractical because of the sort of controlled situation you have to be in and relatively low interference from other sources, I think, right? It uses the interference of your hand placement or your finger positions, and how that affects the Wi-Fi signals traveling from the device to the detection unit, right? Just changing how the environment handles the magnetic radio waves. But if you think about it, I mean, it does seem impractical, but this kind of thing is sort of the thin end of the wedge, right? When technology starts to be used in a certain way, you'll eventually see somebody find a practical way to use it. And the easiest way to imagine this is, suppose you're a data entry clerk in a secure facility or maybe a system administrator, and somebody manages to get a device in a cabinet nearby or inside a printer or something where there's relatively constant, interference around you that they can sort of block out or, mask. They might be able to actually make use of this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating as well. And seeing, I think they kind of had a joke about, government surveillance, right? Possibly wanting to use technology like this or developing technology like this. Even with an encrypted network, thinking about some of the possibilities there because you are using radio waves. It's fascinating just to see what comes out of that in future research and such.
Yep, absolutely. We'll keep our eyes on it. We'll let you know as soon as we hear.
That's right. Listen to us first when it comes out.
That's right. All right. So how are Windows passwords doing these days?
Not so well. In fact, and I like the article here that in quotes says, Windows passwords have actually become less secure over time, where you think with most things get more secure. Windows, that hasn't quite happened. And so this was a good article done about LoftCrack, which is a software, probably one of the original password cracking software that actually came out back in 1997. So we're talking, 20 years ago now.
Wow.
This software has been out there. It recently, in the last couple of years, got re-released by the original team. If we may have talked about one of the people on that team, Chris Wysopal, who was actually one of the founders of Veracode, the company that I work for.
Oh, really? Cool.
No plug intended, but
I did not know that. Cool.
But yeah, Chris Wysopal was on the development team for LoftCrack, and in their newest version that was released, he was interviewed talking about how it's still very easy to crack Windows passwords, And a lot of that is because of our friend backwards compatibility, right?
Okay.
With the older Windows systems, there still has to be, a hash that has to be used. It's called MD4,
Right. Right.
which is actually weaker than the version that was in Windows called Landman. But they've implemented this mainly because of Active Directory and how Active Directory is implemented in companies. So what it shows is nothing's really changed
Yeah.
in 20 years.
When you say they've implemented it, you mean that they've kept the MD4 hash? Is that what the
Yes.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and it's kind of interesting because some people think, well, we'll do a strong hash and a weak hash together, but it really ends
Right.
up being the weakest link, right? The easiest door to get into is the one that they will use. So they'll use the MD4 hash which is, I think, as I understand it, it's based on a shorter hash sequence of bits. So you end up having more collisions, right? Possibly.
Correct.
From different guesses or brute force attempts.
Yep, exactly. And MD4 has been, known to be insecure for over 25 years.
Yes.
So it's one of those things, and there's some good suggestions for Microsoft of, doing things more how in the Unix world, how they secure passwords. It's just one of those things that's known, and I'm sure Microsoft knows about it, but is probably unwilling to change because of our friend backwards compatibility.
Yeah, it's too bad. I mean, they put a lot of effort into making things more secure, and then they leave a little side door open, and not
That's
very
right.
smart. Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
All right.
So, how about those ATM or the chip and pin cards?
Yep.
That are all the rage now.
Yeah, we've had them, and initially we thought they were pretty darn secure, but as we found out, I guess that's not always the case.
Well, it's your mileage may vary, but there's always new research coming out, right? And some research that was released at the DEF CON hacking conference back in Las Vegas in August, there was some research that came out about how an attacker could intercept essentially that it's a one-time code essentially that's used that expires within 60 seconds during that transaction period. And they talked about how that code could essentially be sent to another attacker who could then use that code on another ATM or another type of point of sale terminal to essentially clone that one-time code and create a transaction illegally.
Yeah, it's pretty funny how you see it's a real cat and mouse game, the whole skimmer technology, right? Of putting devices over top the card reader to read the cards as they're going into the card reader and things like that. And every bank has a different new technology every once in a while that is supposed to make it more obvious if something surreptitious gets put onto it. But every time they change it starts to look odd itself, right? So you get suspicious of the actual legitimate technology being used by the banks. So
that's right.
Anyway, but yeah, they do have to do something to try and reduce the amount of physical skimming of things.
Yeah, the one thing just to note about this, and I don't think this is a viable attack that people should be worried about, when they're using their chip and pin cards, to be honest. It's a very kind of theoretical attack at this point. But I will say the one thing that people can do now is when you are putting your card into any device, especially at like a gas station or, an ATM that may be, off the road or not quite, maybe at the airport. Skimmers are very, very popular right now, and this happens quite a bit. So you should be looking at, the facade of that machine when you're putting your card in. If anything looks strange, or take a look at the ATM before you put or that whatever that device is, because this is a very frequent attack, and it could cost you some money coming out of your bank account.
And there's the basic guidance for point of sale devices. You want to be able to sort of see the device and the wire going into the cash register or machine itself, without sort of being routed out of visibility for other places it might go. But yeah, there's lots of cool technical threats within that realm of ATMs that are worth learning a bit about.
That's right.
Yep. Cool. Anything else? Oh, the
Yeah.
old
So
LinkedIn bow hunter.
yeah, you want to have fun with your friends on LinkedIn?
Yeah. I thought this was a great article. We'll put the link in the
Yeah.
show notes, but the way it was written is just so funny.
Yep. Yeah. So this isn't a vulnerability per se. This is kind of a feature or a by design type of thing that is on LinkedIn. So if you're familiar with LinkedIn, there's endorsements, right? So you can endorse your friends for different types of professional skills or expertise. But you can actually endorse your friends for anything, including anger management or bow hunting or you know, guns or anything
Yep.
you like. And this developer basically walks you through the process of using, the website as designed, using a little bit of JavaScript essentially. In the, I don't know if anyone is familiar with, there's a console that you can pull up in your web browser. So if you're using Chrome or Firefox or any other browser, it's called a JavaScript console, and you can actually see the code that makes up the web
Is that
page that
what's
you're
called the
viewing.
developer tools in some browsers, or is it
Yes.
something else? Okay, right.
Exactly, developer tools essentially. And you can actually see, so when you're submitting a form or you're seeing a page load, you can actually see that JavaScript, that code that makes up the page. Well, what this person did was basically take that console and then modify the JavaScript code to change the information that is being sent back to LinkedIn. So essentially, you're endorsing somebody for a typical business skill. You can change that to something else, and then that gets posted to the your friend's profile.
Very cool. So I'm looking at Tom's profile right now, and I'm in the developer tools, the inspector, and I'm looking at all his endorsements, and
That's right.
so I could just change that and resubmit, right? And
Sure, that's right.
now, the way the article was written, the first time I read it, it almost sounded like you could, without even using these tools, can you put in any kind of an endorsement for somebody? Like, say, I want to endorse you for snowmobile riding or something like that, or does it have to fall within a set of predefined ones?
They give you a predefined list.
Okay.
And you select that based on that list.
So this whole client side thing is to get around their restrictions on what can be submitted. Okay.
Yep. And it's a lesson on never, especially for developers, right, of never trust the browser, right, never trust the user, because they can manipulate anything that's on the screen essentially and send that back. There's a lot of websites that do this, and this is, like I said, not necessarily a security problem, but it is something that businesses should be aware of, that you may have a business function, or you may have something that's a legitimate process, and users can manipulate some of that information sometimes, just depending on how the site is set up. The other piece I would say too is that if you did get an endorsement for something that was kind of crazy, you can reject that, right? And you do get a notification when your friends endorse you for something. So
you ask if you want it asks you if you want to let it be shown in your profile, basically.
That's right. Exactly. So you do have some control over what your friends can post, but it's fun nonetheless, but also I think a good lesson for developers.
So I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to say I'm on Tom's thing. Actually, at the top it says, does Tom have these skills or expertise? And then it says type another area of expertise. So I'm going to say snowmobiling.
See what happens.
And he can tell me if he gets a notification, or if I'll tell you if I get any objection to that. Actually, I've typed it, I've hit enter, but nothing's happening. It's just sitting there. So yeah, they probably.
Waiting for the email now.
Oh, you got it?
No, I'm waiting.
Oh, okay. It doesn't look like it actually accepted it, because the cursor's still sitting at the end of the string, and I hit enter, and it's not doing anything. So maybe they've got that ability. As long as, if I was to type something that, for example, risk assessment. Let me see. Yeah, so it pops up in a list.
Yep.
For risk assessment, I can click that, and there we go. Cool. So, well, that's good to know. So this really would be something that illustrates the fact that the client side being able to manipulate things. You see this sometimes. I've checked sometimes when you register or reserve a room at a hotel. Their webpage, registration webpage, has tons and tons of HTML code, right? And sometimes I open it up to see if you can see what the coupon codes are, and sometimes they're actually in there.
They are.
So
Yep.
you can get a discount just for finding it. It takes a bit of effort, but it rewards you, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's actually a pretty common vulnerability that my team finds. So when we're doing web application pen tests, we find that there's a lot of information that's pushed down to the browser that probably shouldn't be,
Right.
and we always make findings around those types of things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're at the end of our limit right now. We've got. I have to get going, but one of the things. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Tom?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I was just going to do a little quick recap of things that we might be doing in the future because I have something planned coming. I'm going to be speaking at the Countermeasure Conference 2016 here in Ottawa. It's be the 4th time I think I've presented there. I do long trips, right? 10 kilometers downtown, and I'm there. But so I'm presenting on the top 10 pitfalls of phishing assessments. Don't snag your line. So.
Nice.
After the last year or so, I've been helping businesses plan and execute their phishing assessment. Found some really kind of interesting decision points that people don't often think about, and it's worth discussing the implications of those. So I'll be at the Countermeasure 2016 conference here in Ottawa, November 16th, 17th, I believe it is, 17th, 18th. Very cool. So yeah, if you're up here, make sure you come and get in touch. So that's it for me. I don't have anything else exciting happening, but not that I can talk about anyway.
Everything else is top secret. Yeah.
So I guess at that point we will let people know our contact information and how to reach us.
Yep. You can reach us at feedback@sharedsecurity.net through email, or you can visit our website, sharedsecurity.net. And of course, we're on Facebook and Twitter and everything but MySpace.
Yeah. I meant to get on there sometime, but haven't got to it yet.
We don't have a band.
That's
yet.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Oh, I meant to ask, do you have any events coming up, or are you just tied up in consulting work?
Nothing the rest of the year. There's no speaking engagements for me, which is kind of a nice break. But next year I will be again out at InfoSec World.
Right.
So that's in April, but that's about it.
Cool.
For me.
Great. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.